Hello, and welcome back to some Illogic. For those unfamiliar, I am Illogic. I'm the coach of the Buffalo Bouffalant, and it's been a couple of seasons, but I am back to provide you with coverage of my Bouffalant as we take on the Wooper Club League in Season 15. Last season we covered here was Season 12, which ended in heartbreaks. My Garchomp failed to outspeed Salamence, leading to a third-fourth place finish. Since then, we've had two more WCL seasons, and boy have those been successful. Season 13 was an auction season, started by drafting two pre-selected pods of 3, then each week bid on additionally available Pokemon to round out our team over time. I very much enjoyed the squad, most of which were claimed in the auction for cheap. Baxcalibur and Slowking as the top tiers, a potent duo, along with standouts like Hisuian Arcanine, Sandy Shocks, Hippowdon, Forretress, Wo-Chen again, Gardevoir, Rotom Fan, Tauros, and the Hisuian Sneasel. Highlights included a quadruple choice scarf victory in the quarters of the Agrons, followed by an impressive performance from the lower tiers in the semis over the Incineroar, but we fell short in the finals. Against the Wobbuffets, Baxcalibur was set up with a D-Dance behind a sub, but Scarf Armarouge outsped and clicked Destiny Bond to take it out. Then Galarian Zapdos lived to Volt Switch from Sandy Shocks and Agility'd up with the Weakness Policy boost to take out the rest of my team, even living the E-Speed from Hisuian Arcanine. The one time I don't bring Hippo or Helmet. Anyways, Season 14 was a double season, so I took advantage of the lighter ban list to use some mods I wouldn't ordinarily get the chance to abuse. Chiyu and Shaman's Gaia highlighted as the stars, followed by Hoopa Unbound, Ursaluna, Keldeo, Iron Treads, Rotom Wash, Gyarados, Hariyama, Gothitelle, and Pheasantipity. Between wins over the Wobbuffets and Noctels, among others, we got to the playoffs, where Gothitelle annoyed the crap out of the Wooper Boopers in the quarters, and the Shaman Sky Chiyu center stage in the semis against the Summit County Psyducks. That led to a rematch against the Wobbuffets, where we took the Season 14 crown thanks to a clutch Turn 1 flinch from the Air Slash Shaman Sky, overcoming a crucial Zen Headbutt miss from Hoopa thanks to D-Dance Tera Poison Gyarados to take home our 6th WCL title. Season 2 Monotype, Season 3 VGC, Season 4 Draft, Season 6 Draft, and Season 9 Multi-Battle joining those. As you can see, the WCL doesn't just do straight up standard drafts, but with us getting back to it in Season 15, the Bouffalant are looking to cement the fact that we are the best team in the league, even with the Noctels and Wobbuffets hot on our heels. That leads us to the present, where we have to continue to adjust to all the changes from 2 DLCs coming out since the last time we were on this channel. We've got a staggering 18 coaches competing in the same league in the same season, fighting over the same Pokemon, where only 198 will be chosen. We've got tiers 15 to 0 and 90 points to spend, as well as 20 points to spend on Tera captains, who can freely Tera, but will be shown at the beginning of the match. For any questions on specific rules and whatnot, definitely check out the fan doc I put together, shamelessly stealing from another very prominent league and adjusting it to our purposes, but figured it may be a nice way for others to follow along with the league. From rules to weekly recaps to the full MVP race, we've got all the information you want about WCL Season 15 and more. And if that isn't even enough for you, don't forget to check me out on the main Wooper Club channel below as well. But enough of me sponsoring myself, we've got a draft and some mods to acquire. But at pick 12 out of 18, it's of course quite difficult to guarantee any picks at all through the draft. Even taking into consideration all of my top 5 best mons would be gone, the picks I wanted the most in Great Tusk and Meowscarada were both picked in the top 6. So what was I left with? I originally wanted to grab Annihilate as a sturdy mon that could take advantage of smart switches and hit with a powerful Rage Fist, and try and pair that Defiant mon with something like, say, Hisuian Samurott to pressure opponents with hazards. But I became concerned about 2 factors. Speed is the main one, as it was incredibly difficult to find the proper speed tiers without investing in the higher point valued mons. My first 2 picks, as high tiers, being at 95 and 85 speed, wouldn't be getting to the higher echelons that I would want. The complicating factor there would be the points allotted. I convinced Steve to up the total points to 90, but that sure still didn't feel like enough as I started doing up mocks to figure out what may work for speed. So I decided to go with one of my backup options, and although I'm not the most ecstatic about the round 1 pick, I think it's reliable and opens up quite a few options for speed tiers and Pokemon that I've wanted to use but never got the chance to. So, with the 12th overall pick, the Buffalo Bouffalant, select Latios for 15 points. The introduction of Flip Turn was huge for this mod, and I kept lingering on it through the first few rounds of my Season 14 draft, but in singles, I think it'll be even more valuable. I haven't picked a Dragon type actually in a couple of seasons, and I love the typing defensively, so long as I can still punish Steels and Fairies that resist Draco, and or the buffed Luster Purge. Of course, with options like Aura Sphere, Trick, T-Bolt, Ice Beam, Surf, Grass Knot, even Calm Mind and Recover sets to potentially boost past some of those threats, maybe a Defog set to support the squad, plus Flip Turn of course, and the added utility of a nice set for Resistances and Levitate. It's tough to say the Latios will ever really struggle. And of course, setting a key piece of the team at base 110 speed is a big deal for the draft as a whole, especially because I always try to grab at least 2 mons at base 110 or higher in every draft I do. That's becoming more and more relevant as speed tiers keep going up. It's a great Scarfer, Specs candidate, Lorb, maybe Soldew with its signature item, Leftovers with her cover, maybe something like a Colberberry for good measure. It's a Tera candidate too with that Levitate ability, but we'll see how the draft shakes out. It's a nice start, so how do I follow it up? How about a mon that takes advantages of some resistances and helps in kind of while being a big deterrent to steals among others? Here's a mon I've wanted to use for a while, and after using Hariyama quite well last season, I think it's time we upgrade with the 13-point Iron Hands. The robotic sumo provides strong electric and fighting stabs along with plenty of coverage such as EQ, Heavy Slam, Ice Punch, Rock Slide, Fire Punch, Play Rough, plus options like Volt Switch for momentum, right alongside Latios of course, Whirlwind to phase, Sword Stance or Bulk Up potentially to boost up too. It's got silly high HP, attack, and defense, makes it a natural candidate for something like Assault Vest, though Leftovers will put in work with that high HP stat as well. Choice Band is a great item for it, Punching Glove, Lumberry, Shuckaberry, potentially something like a Rocky Helmet, maybe even a Booster Energy for that free Life Orb boost until Switch Out. This thing is a beast stat-wise. Considering what we saw Hariyama do, I have a very good feeling about what the future version is capable of as well. That's going to lead to our next 2 picks. I see that Ice, Fairy, Dragon, and Ghost are the types we're weak to without a resist at this time, and 3 of those can get taken care of with a sturdy Steel type. Really, with both mons weak to Fairy, I'd also like to grab a sturdy Poison or Fire type to go with them, and once again, plans go astray, but in a good way. I'm still concerned about those speed tiers. What am I getting that's faster than Latios? I like that getting the 110 speed mon opened up getting a different electric type than otherwise, but what is the plan for that? Well, my original plan for my Steel and Poison were Corviknight and Toxapex, some big old walls that I wouldn't ordinarily use but would like to learn to love. But those are some points, 13 and 11 respectively, but I also saw another possibility for speed sitting there at 14 points, a mon that I've wanted to use for the last couple of gens but never got to. Well, if that's in the plans, we're going to go with the cheaper option, but the 11-point Empoleon is still definitely going to be effective. My Steel isn't weak to fire, with its 3 weaknesses being covered by Latios and providing my first hazards and Stealth Rock, while being my second defogger too on a team increasingly resistant to rocks. Empoleon can be a solid wall in either direction with his Bedefiline, very respectable special attack stat and decent enough coverage, got some great buffs since we saw it last in Gen 7 too, with Flip Turn and Roost running off these support sets alongside Knockoff plus Haze. But don't underestimate offensively. Subpatai with Agility was a favorite of mine back in Gen 4, and the new competitive ability can punish things like Defog or Intimidate with startling efficiency. Lefties, Type Resist Berries, maybe even Specs or a Mystic Water to also help power up an option like Aqua Jet. A lot of neat possibilities for item choices. This is a cool mon. And that leaves us with the Poison type. Not many options available if I want a Fire type as well and want to minimize my ground weakness while keeping the possibility of a grounded Poison for T-Spikes. Well, there is one option that also completes the fantasy core of Fairy, Dragon, and Steel. So for the first time since Season 4, welcome back to the Bouffalant, the 9-point Galarian Weezing, a defensive beast who will generally run something like Black Sludge or Rocky Helmet. Galarian Weezing provides some great resistance immunities for the team while picking up T-Spikes coverage and some Trixie sets. It's not a straightforward powerhouse, but I really love what it can do. Willow, Toxic, Haze, Pain Split, Defog, and Destiny Bonds are all very unique options Weezing has access to, in addition to the offensive stabs, plus things like Overheat, Thunderbolt, or Dark Pulse. Oh yeah, and how about those 3 abilities? Levitate is obviously great, Misty Surge can do some cheeky things, say add in a Misty Seed or stopping some mixed dragon types, and Neutralizing Gas is a super fascinating ability with a few odd ones that it can really impact. It's such a strange mod, but it's got a funny hat, and what it does for the team is much appreciated, so we'll keep it. Now that we have the core, minus that high tier I'm looking at, solidified, it's time to take care of a couple points of business. I've got the 110 speed and higher than that speed quote-unquote covered, but past that we're very slow and need to round out the mid to high speed tiers. The other point of order would be Tera. I do need to decide on my Tera abusers this season. Do I take an already very good mon and abuse it further with Tera, or elevate mid-tiers with Tera? That is, do I allow, say, Latios to go electric or steel to abuse Levitate and set up, or go something like Flying with Iron Hands to give it a shot at breaking more easily too? Or do I take some mid-tier mons that can be good with or without Tera, but can also elevate their game significantly with that Tera boost? Well, to fix both problems, I decided to kind of go for both to this point, even though the coverage and use looks a little bit similar to Latios. I picked up my first Tera Captain, and that is going to be the 6-point Mismagius. It's got low HP and defense, but the Spadef is kind of fearsome actually, and it's another ground and fighting immunity for now too, and the speed of 105 is a good next step down from Latios. The Stab Shadow Ball is tough to resist. We've got a couple great typings to go into potentially in things like Electric Steel, or maybe Fairy to boost Dazzling Gleam or Draining Kiss coverage without needing Terra Blast. It's a solid Scarf or Specs candidate like Latios, which may open up Latios to other roles as well, and means it can help break down checks for Latios too while spamming slightly different coverage options. It also has the option to set up with Nasty Plot, and after just one of these moves are going to start hitting hard against unsuspecting opponents. We're going to add in some other options like Willow, Trick, T-Wave. We've got T-Bolt coverage, Power Gem, Psyshock, Mystical Fire, Icy Wind, plus the oft-slept-on Hex. We've got something cooking with our first Tera Captain, only 6 points to grab. Okay, I admit it. At this point, I chickened out. I thought my next couple of picks were actually pretty safe despite the heavy spending here at the beginning, and there were a couple of people who may still have had an opportunity to grab this high point pick I've had in my back pocket. Somewhat justified by Chad picking Weavile, my backup option later in this same round, I went ahead and picked up my fastest mon from here from tier 14. It's going to be Cinderace. At base 119 with the fire typing and a powerful attack stat, this is going to be a mon I'll be relying on most weeks to bring the speed and power. Libero is obviously an important aspect to this mon, giving stab not just to Pyro Ball, but also that if U-turn, high jump kick, sucker punch, potentially even things like Gunk Shot, Iron Head, or Acrobatics. Plus we can change types with non-attacking moves like with Taunt, or Sword Stance, or the super important Court Change. The move pool isn't too vast, but that means we obviously have a few different options, implying we can run a few items nicely too. We've got Band, we've got Boots of course, Life Orb, even things like Charcoal or a Choice Scarf on top of its speed. I love how it fills out the speed tier at the top too. Provides a strong spammable fire move as well to help with steals trying to wall Latios. Gives another fairy resist on top of the other 3 we got right around here, while giving another fire and ice resist. This is basically everything I wanted, with even more hazard punishment and momentum on top of it. Well, there is one type I've continued to neglect resistances to, and have in fact built up to weaknesses, and that is Ghost. I was definitely hesitant to grab a Dark type, considering both Latios and Iron Hands are already weak to Fairy. It would be nice to grab some resistances to some other types too in need of them, such as Ice or Flying, the lack of which drove me to something like Empoleon over Scizor, considering my Electric doesn't also resist Flying. So when you're looking for bunches of resistances, it's easy to go for the Steel typing. I'm not opposed to doubling up on Steel, and we can get Bisharp for only 7 points. Who am I to say no to that? If we can go in the correct direction here even. These resists on Bisharp are pretty great, of course. We're also adding a much-needed physical attacker to the crew as well, plus maybe the biggest factor being the strong priority in Sucker Punch. Honestly, there isn't too much to Bisharp, but what it does bring is pretty noticeable and impactful. A great combination of traits that led it to meta relevance despite now being a tier 7 threat, so lacking knockoff only really. Still, Lash Out, Sucker Punch, Iron Head, and Sword Stance is a real solid threat, isn't it? Low kick is possible coverage, as could be obviously Terra Blast, because this is going to be one of my Terra Captains here as well. Potentially get it out of some of these typings if I want to be able to diversify just a little bit from the Steel typing, maybe boost up the Dark type, maybe go into Fire to resist Will-O-Wisp, or be immune to that rather. Also got a bunch of other cool options. We've got Thunderwave, Taunt, maybe even Stealth Rock if I'm feeling frisky. We've got a couple of other really good traits though. We're going to start with Defiant, the physical counterpart of competitive, so good luck bringing stat-lowering moves against my Steel types. Makes me feel pretty good about my hazard staying up too if Mismagius can beat the Spinner. The other part of the game is the item. It's often been used with black glasses to boost up the highly spammable dark moves, and yes, that is always an option. It's going to continue to be one. But this gen also introduced King Gambit, meaning we have Eviolite access to make Bisharp bulkier than one might expect as well. Love the idea that we could suddenly go super tanky backed up by the Eviolite, or invest in that sneaky base 70 speed and suddenly nuke something with a strong Dreadplate boosted dark move. Again, we haven't mentioned anything groundbreaking, but those few things that make Bisharp unique are what I want, and maybe if I don't want some of those things, we can Tera as well. We can get a physical Fairy type, physical Ghost type to maybe put the screws on a fighting type, maybe just boost those dark moves while removing fire and ground weaknesses. We've got some really cool options with the Bisharp that I'm really happy to see happen. We're going to have to round out our mid and low tiers before we get into the really interesting picks. One thing I often emphasize in drafts over other people is the importance of a good ground type. However, with the limited points available and lack of Terra abuse available, I'm going to have to go a bit budget on this one, but worry not. I'm very happy to use this guy whose evolved form was highly contested earlier in the draft. Yeah, we're grabbing another Eviolite monster. This one's going to be the 4-point, if we can go the right direction there we go, Gligar. Yeah, we've got another ground immunity, fighting resist from Poyon and King Gambit. We're basically just hoping we don't play against Mammoth Swine, but check out Gligar's defensive profile. 65 HP and Spidef isn't too hot, but 105 defense and Eviolite sure are. Plus we have that 85 speed threshold to help bridge the big gap we've got. Not too hard to imagine us investing in just HP and speed, for example. Beyond all those factors, the move pool is absolutely nuts. Spikes have been added, plus we've got another good Stealth Rock setter, another Toxic Spike setter. We're still not too passive either because of access to U-Turn, Knockoff, Toxic unusually, plus Stab Earthquake, even off base 75, isn't too shabby if not resisted or if we can invest into the attack. Taunt is cheeky, a Swords Dance set seems possible honestly, and a little bit of coverage for some specific mons we need to check. No Roost is a bummer, but with all those other upsides, a 4-point Gligar looks like a steal to me. You've seen Kingambit and Gliscor in OU, what about Bisharp and Gligar in draft? Okay, time to finish off those speed tiers. With Gligar, we've got an 85 to 70 gap, which isn't too terrible, but that 105 to 85 definitely needs another Mon smack dab in the middle of it. And boy, have I got a strange Mon to fill it in that I've wanted to use for a long time. How about the 7-point Yanmega to be able to fill in that speed gap there before any speed boost shenanigans? And with Protect, there's always going to be a chance to outspeed what we need to, barring priority. Though if we don't want speed boost, Tinted Lens is well known as one of the best abilities in the game, hitting resists as though they were neutral, and we realize that Bug, and especially Flying, are quite spammable to a lack of immunities. What Steel Walls both? That's why we're going to give the option to Tera. Ground is common at the top to hit things like Heatran, but Fighting, Fire, and even things like Water or Electric may find plenty of use as well. And if those abilities weren't enough, Frisk is one of the best draft abilities for telling me my opponent's item on switch. Great for this format. It's another special attacker with a new set of special attacking coverage from the others, often going Throat Spray to make it a little more spammable, or maybe Heavy Duty Boots to help me get in often. We've already got 4 hazard removers to help out with that. Not too many more moves to look at, but we've got U-Turn, Shadow Ball, Psychic, Giga Drain, and Ancient Power to go with stabs, not to mention the benefit of Protect on speed boost sets. I'm hopeful we'll finally let this guy shine in the WCL after years of neglect. Okay, so as you can see, we've got 4 points left and still have 2 more picks to go. If I want to avoid the 0-point tier, and trust me, I want to avoid the 0-point tier, though not everybody did, I'm going to need either a 3 and a 1 or a pair of 2-pointers to finish us off. It's tough to say that things from this tier are going to fulfill any particular needs in the draft, as they wouldn't be worth this little if they were reliable enough to fill those niches, but I think we can make something work here, and that's going to start with filling in the 85 to 70 speed tier a little bit, and we're going to take the 3-point Cloth, filling in at 75 speed. We're going to add in Regenerator as a cute option to make this a budget tank, especially with Assault Vest, plus a respectable 100 base attack, and we're starting to cook a little bit. Look at the move pool. Aside from Rock Stab, there's Brick Break, another Crabhammer user, strangely enough, Endeavor, Facade, High Horsepower, Knockoff, Temper Flare, Thief, Throat Chop, Trailblaze, X-Scissor, plus Stealth Rock, or maybe even Swords Dance to boast in non-attacking options. Assault Vest seems a natural fit with Regenerator to make a veritable tank, plus maybe something like Choice Band, maybe even a Rocky Helmet or Lefties, potentially Type Resist Berries, or an Expert Belt with all the coverage we've got. It's another good Fire and Flying resist, another Rocker, another Knockoff user was a big factor here too, and something that could potentially pivot around with help from Regenerator. Maybe we can have this guy get some big hits off for free with some very spammable moves. I think it's worth a shot. And that's going to leave us with a single point left at the end of the draft. We've already got everything we need, really, so I suppose we should at least try to grab a resist to Water or Ghost, the 2 types we're net weak to. Considering Water's only weakness with the type-changing Cinderace plus the 3-point Cloth and 4-point Gligar, I'm thinking one of those normal types there can give me a second Ghost resist, in this case an immunity, to round out the team. As nice as Sawsbuck would be to give me the grass typing to chiefly resist Water and Ghost, I don't want to add another Ice or Fire weakness, so we'll stick to the other 1-point options. Instead, we've got another Hazard Remover that also has base 115 base attack for 1 point. That seems like a pretty good deal for my boy Komala, who will also be able to help with potential status spam too, thanks to Comatose. With a respectable Spidef stat too, and a natural fit with Assault Vest or Choice Band items alongside lefties with support sets, we've got a ton of options. The move pool is pretty great too. Aside from needing to use Body Slam over return from past gens, we've got bulk up sets to boost the lackluster defense stat, Brick Break, Earthquake, Endeavor, Fling, Gunk Shot, Ice Spinner, Iron Head, Knockoff again is big, Player Off, Rapid Spin is an alternate means of hazard removal, Rock Slide, Seed Bomb, Sleep Talk, which always works because we are Comatose, Sucker Punch for priority, Super Fang, one of my favorite moves of all time, Super Power, Sword Stance for the offensive approach, Trailblaze, U-Turn is yet another pivot, Wood Hammers, and Headbutt in the secret tech Wish, even with our HP stat not being the greatest. That's a ton of great options. We'll see how many we can potentially employ with the 1-pointer this season. So that's going to be the team. In speed order, we've got Cinderace with 119 up at the top, followed by Latios with 110, Tera Captain Mismagius with 105, Tera Captain Yanmega at 95, Gligar at 85, Cloth with 75, Tera Captain Bisharp 70, Komala 65, Empoleon and Weezing-Galar with 60, and Iron Hands at 50. Lots of momentum on the team. Flip turn Latios, Volt Switch Iron Hands, Flip turn Empoleon, plus U-turn Cinderace, Gligar, Yanmega, and Komala. We have 5 taunt users, 4 knockoff users, Rip Bisharp, 6 hazard removers with court change included, and 5 setters with court change not included, and a little bit of priority with Sucker Punch notably coming from Cinder, Bisharp, and Komala. When I take a step back and look at the team as a whole, it admittedly kind of looks and feels a little eclectic. There are quite a few mons here that individually I've wanted to use for quite a while, but do they work together? Type chart wise, the only weakness is water, which isn't really too bad considering the weaknesses are, as mentioned before, the type changing Cinderace plus Gligar and Cloth combined for 7 points. And the speed tiers come together well too. The hazard game is obviously outstanding. But something feels a bit off, I'm not sure. Hopefully my good play from the last couple of seasons will help carry us through. I think quite a few coaches struggled with the lower point totals this season, and Michael of the Burbs and I did a pretty good job taxing some of the higher usage and speedy mons, so I think some of our problems aren't ours alone. Whereas a few coaches had to settle for tier 0 mons, I like all of ours. But did we sacrifice too much in the mid tiers to get there? It feels like there's a good amount of pressure on our Tera captains, plus maybe things like the Empoleon and Weezing picks in the middle of the pack to pick up some slack. And if we can do that, we should be golden. Again, a lot of the mons I've wanted to use, with only Weezing-Galar being a repeat in standard drafts for me, so I'm ready to see what these mons can do. That's going to wrap up things for me. Be sure to check back next week to go over our Week 1 matchup, and you already know this is going to be a banger because it's a rematch against the Route 1 Burbs. The last video on this channel was our loss to them in the semifinals back in Season 12. See if we can get some revenge. It's been a little bit since we faced them, and the Burbs did have an off season last year, but now that we're back in singles, maybe this is their opportunity. So we're going to need to come out strong in that first week matchup against our good buddy Michael. We'll see you there.